Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplacedstraws.com where music comes to life. And my guest today may be best known for bands like Arc of Life and Sound of Contact, but today he's here to talk about a very special release with his project Sonic Elements. The record is called It, a celebration of Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and it celebrates the 50th anniversary of that monumental record. Please welcome Dave Kerzner. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Jeff.
So there's so much to talk about with this, but before we get into the what and the why, let's talk about the who. You have an amazing lineup of musicians on this record. Who joined you and how'd you guys all come together?
Well, the first person to mention would be appropriately Nick DiVirgilio. Uh, Nick and I go way back to the beginning of his both of our careers, actually playing Kevin Gilbert, the late Kevin Gilbert. So we played with him in a band called Giraffe and Thud, two bands actually. And with Giraffe, we performed The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, actually, about an hour of it in 1994 at a festival called Prague Fest.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been working together ever since. Of course, for those I'm sure people know in the prog world, Nick was in Spock's Beard. He's in Train. He played with Genesis. He's played with a lot of people. Tears for Fears. Great drummer, great guy, and he did his own tribute to The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway called Rewiring Genesis in I think 2008, 9 around then, and with a mutual friend named Mark Hornsby, and so when it came out, I was like, "Oh, this is cool." And they didn't use keyboards; they decided to use orchestral instruments instead of keyboards. And I thought, "Oh, that's interesting." And then Mark had played me a version of "In the Cage." So actually, I don't think I've ever told this specific. Kind of interesting for those who are into these things. So Mark was doing some kind of session at Abbey Road for something else, and then I think or just was somehow there with an orchestra. And I think John Hinchy, who he works with, is a conductor and arranger, and they managed to do two additional songs or something, and one of them was "Long Day's Life" by Kevin Gilbert, and they later released like an orchestral version of that, which is a beautiful song. And then they also did "In the Cage," in a different version than what's on Rewiring Genesis with this, I think the London Philharmonic or whoever was there. And so they played it for me, and I was like, wait, they were going to do it as a bonus track. I'm like, don't release it. What if I licensed this and all the stuff, just the drums and the orchestra that you did, because I have this idea, back then I owned Tony Banks, the keyboards he used. Today I actual keyboards. I bought his Lamb rig, most of it, and I have a cab rig, and when they closed their studio. But even before that, I had Mellotrons and harps and stuff. So I was like, let me do a version with keyboards, maybe different singers and stuff like that. So anyway, long story short, they agreed, and it helped them recoup, their expenses, because they had all these expenses. I'm like, okay, maybe this is a good idea. But crazy, dude, keyboard guy worked on his own version. And that was in 2011. And it only took me, till 2004 to 25 to release it, finish it. But anyway, so yeah, Nick DiVirgilio. And then I did, so here's like the key story to the whole thing in terms of the bonus tracks, because there's bonus tracks on a 3-disc version, a deluxe that have outtakes, and some of those outtakes are alternate versions with different singers. One of them was Nad Sylvan before he sang with Packet, and it actually Chamber of 32 Doors, and Steve told me that that's what he used to get the gig.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's how it happened. Interestingly enough, not many people know that backstory, and of course Nad's been with him forever, and he's done with them. Steve Hackett, Genesis Revisited, and I was also on Genesis Revisited album. I played the solo for Supper's Ready with Roger, along with him. We dueled that one, and anyway, so Billy Sherwood was also singing on it, so there's a couple of those from Yes. Randy McStein, which he sang back in New York City, but we couldn't find it. So that one, I'll find it. And then Francis Dunnery from It Bites. And what happened is we started singing. Was singing a few tunes, and he loved it. And he said to me, he's like, this one, he said, why don't you have, I'll just sing the whole thing. He said, it'll be better because, I mean, he just wanted to do it, but at the same time, he made a good argument, which was it's a concept album, it's real. And you can't just have different singers, you know, like it. He's also a hardcore Genesis fan. Like I am too, but not as hardcore as him. He sort of represents the kind of picky Gabriel era fan, you know, that's like, no, you know, this you can't do this. So I actually, and I'm pals with him, so I like I like that as a barometer of. It was a good idea anyway. He made a good point. So I ended up singing the whole thing. There, the other singer is Martin Levac, who played the Phil Collins role in the musical box, and he does a Phil Collins, and he has that timbre really, and he also drums on a few tracks that Nick we redid from the Rewiring Genesis sessions. So ended up being a good move. And on top of that, I gotta say, I mean, he's the MVP because he was my uh, bouncing off, you know, barometer, whatever you want to call it, like test to see. I just wanted him to like it because he was so involved in it. But I'm like, what do you think of this mix? What do you think? You know, final arrangement and mix and everything. And you know, he would either give a thumbs up or he would make a critique. And in a few cases, most of the time it was just a thumbs up. You know, and we were on the money. And a few other times he would say, as a Genesis fan, I would be offended by that. You know, you can't. You know, like we went off like on counting out time. I went a little more Beatlesy with this. Like this is, and it's cool. The amount of Beatlesy that we did, he was cool, and people generally like it, and I love it. But I went further with that, and like into Abbey Road medley territory with Fernando doing like some solos in the left and right, and right in the middle of the song. And he was right. It was like it's a little like it's a little too you went too far down. Like all right, fine. And so, but you know, with me, I mean, it's like I still like it. So it's a bonus track instrumentally, and it didn't work because it kind of interrupted the vocal. You were sort of waiting for the next line. What is this tangent? And so, but musically, instrumentally, it's like okay, you get to hear what we were going for, like a fun little ride as a bonus track. But we cut the fat, and he helped me do that, like to where it's like, you know, like it went through two layers of approval. I had to like it, and then even though I'm the producer, and he was like a production assistant, it was like, all right, do you like it too? Like, you know, and we do. Okay, good, it's good to go. And you know, that made it take longer, but it was worth it. So anyway, those are those guys. There's also Steve Rothery from Marillions on there. Roger King from Steve Hackett's band is on there. Ian Benamel from the Musical Box. Matt Thomas Overdrive from Genesis show. So I tapped into some of my friends from tribute bands for certain, even the guys from Genetics, like for pictures of a Slipperman. I'm like, they made the Slipperman outfit. Have a picture of that for my thing because I'm not going to do all that. So like, there's so many Genesis loving musicians. Dan Cody, Dan Hancock, who were in the original Giraffe with me, are on it. Lee Pomeroy, who played with Steve Hackett and has played with people, is on Back in New York City. Billy Sherwood's on it. Fernando Perdomo. So you know, again, and Dave Schultz. It's just it's full of love. You know, these are great musicians in their own right, and some of them do their own albums. Some of them, you know, are in tribute bands. Some of them aren't. But the common denominator is we just love this album. And we love Genesis, so it's very heartfelt tribute.
Now, when you talk about all of these musicians, I mean, you guys are all over the world. So I assume you kind of had to record this remotely. So is there a challenge in something sort of as dense as Lamb where you're using a certain sound, but you got to make sure that your guitar player on the other side of the world is using a similar rig to get that feel? Is it more difficult with something like Lamb to work remotely like that?
I mean, yeah, probably. There are is this going to be a video that people can see?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to show you something. That rig is a mess right now, but that the way that I'm very, old school meets new school
Yeah.
in terms of production. I'm really into it more than the typical, like Tom Oralgi, who I work with a lot, and he's a good pal of mine. He's mixed tons of records. Him and his brother
The
Chris,
legend, yeah.
right? They're not as particular about like, I mean, they are particular in their own way. They're my mentors. I learned from them, and also Nick Davis as well, who's another mentor. He produced and co-produced and engineered Genesis. Those guys all use SSL consoles and their particular racks of stuff, and that's what they do. And people want to emulate their sound. So, and I do too, sometimes. But what I'm really into is flavors of the consoles that were used on the actual records. So I've got, a pair of Helios. Actually, I have two pairs of Helios, which is the console that they. Oh, nerdy here for a second, but no,
Fine with me.
Trident Studios had a Sound Techniques console, so I've got several channels of that. Abbey Road, I've got channels of that, and so whether it really makes a difference or not, I think it's more of a subtle thing that most people notice, but some people subconsciously, like there's authenticity about the various effects. I've got all the color sound effects, and I sit down with Steve Hackett. Even just this past, I gotta say, I screwed up one thing. I mean, I didn't screw it up. It's fine. We did our own version, but I saw him for Cruise to the Edge, Steve, and I'm proud to say that I'm actually friends with Steve. I mean, I've helped Tony Banks. I've worked with him in certain ways remotely and helped him with sounds and all that stuff. And we've talked or whatever. I don't like go out to dinner with Tony. He's not, but Steve is. So, like Steve I've had dinners with, and we hung out and had some pina coladas. It was great. And
I've had Steve on here many times, and he's one of my favorite people in the world to talk to. We have the greatest conversations.
he's so nice, and he's how you'd want all your musical heroes to be.
100%. Yeah.
Well, he's the best. Anyway, so I asked him this question, and I haven't yet told anybody.
Yeah.
And I know when I was doing the album, and it's fine because we were doing a version. But had I known this, I probably would have done it. To be honest, I'm going to tell you this little secret, and I'm going to do it anyway. On sounds like a little weird idea, but the guy is so underrated for how innovative and creative he was. Anyway, so I was talking to him about the Lamb, and I gave him the CD. He hasn't listened to it yet. Curious what he thinks, but he loved the idea of it and everything with an orchestra, like a film score. That's our approach. He loved it, and I thought he would. And I purposely didn't ask him to play on it because A, he's doing his own Genesis Revisited, and B, with Steve, I'd rather he play on one of my own songs, and he'd probably rather do that too. Like
Yeah.
he's such a creative, vital, modern. Like he's a creative force still. He's not just someone hashing
100%.
for his audiences. He loves playing on new music and stuff. So it's a gift every time he does it with me. I've done it like 7 or 8 times already, so it's amazing.
Yeah.
But anyway, collaborated. So, what was I saying? Oh, I was about to, oh yeah, okay. So, starting out, he was indulging me with my questions, because I don't always remember to ask. I'm just hanging out. Okay, this time I'm gonna ask. What did you use on the Blumba? So we were talking about the Lamb, and I said, first thing I asked him was, okay, what is Enosification? Brian Eno, like,
Yeah.
what did he? Because there's all this kind of, and he explained it was mostly like manipulating Peter's voice, and I think the guitar solo for Counting Out Time. The real
Yeah.
sound, probably with his EMS synthy.
Mm.
Um, can you still?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I got
Um,
it.
yeah, I forgot to turn my do not disturb on
Yeah.
phone call here. Anyway, so I was like, oh, okay, and then I thought, because like I said, I'm into all the keyboards that were used on Genesis albums for different times, and there's a art pro soloist right behind me, and that's what he used. And there's I'll show you in this room. That's the 2600. That's Tony Banks 2600. But he didn't have that. He had that for Wind and Wuthering,
Mhm.
and onward. Well, and then there were three, but he didn't have a 2600.
Mhm.
Anyway, long story short, like the 2600 could do like wind effects,
Mhm.
but Pro Solos can't.
Yeah.
So I said, who did the wind effect? I thought maybe it was Brian Eno because the EMS synthy,
Yeah.
which is the Dark Side of the Moon synth, and used it a lot, can. And he said, oh no, that was me. I said, really? How? He took two fuzz pedals into each other, into a wah wah, into an echoplex. And they're so
Yeah.
noisy. Wah wah was the filter, and it's all.
Mhm.
And then so he's just messing around. It's like, dude, you're a genius. Like, and that's why you're never gonna get that sound from a synth because it's not a
It
synth.
wasn't on there.
And I'm like, anyway. So I'm like, if I knew that, I probably would have done that because that's. Ironically, I did do another effect with a wah wah that I learned. That was how they do Pink Floyd echoes.
Mhm.
You run into a wah wah with a certain type of guitar backwards, and then the wah wah goes whip 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 like Eagles or Albatrosses, and that's how they do that. And I did that on Dimensionaut from Sound of Contact strip a slip, and I used it again on the waiting room here. So, but this other trick, anyway, I just
That's cool.
now I will say for what it's worth, obviously there are fellow musicians who and or music fans who really love that stuff. They ask me like, "Did you use vintage gear?
Yeah.
Did you use old?" And I'm like, yeah, yeah, and they enjoy that. Other people who are just like, "Look, I just listen to music. I don't know what a mellotron is. What are you talking?" Um, it's like it helps me achieve what I wanted to achieve, which was a balance of something nostalgic and authentic,
Mhm.
something that sounds Genesis-y.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like whoa, like distractingly modern, like using a DX7 or something. You're like, whoa, what just happened? Like, what are they, you
Mhm.
know? But modern in other ways that would be palatable, would be
Yeah.
acceptable Genesis fan to where, I mean, even to be fair, I mean, and I've actually tried to help change this,
Mhm.
but some people are bummed out when Tony Banks uses like a Korg to play an old sound or some new sound that just like doesn't have portamento, and
Yeah.
what are you doing in age with that sound? And or a choir that's not the Mellotron choir. And I had a little argument with Tony about the Mellotron choir. He doesn't like it, and I'm like, well, you like it? It's great. He's like, it's not great. It's terrible. I'm like, no, it's great. I mean, like, but you like this Mellotron strings, it's,
Mhm.
and he likes it. And he said to me straight up, he's like, I'm just not nostalgic
Yeah.
about those attached to them like you guys are. And so to him, I think like if he had a Korg Oasis back then, he would have used that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the sounds that we hear from these keyboard, and he's not the only one, are literally they're great because that's all they had back then. Made it work, and and what I love, again from them, it's like what a pain in the ass that was, and I had to run it through a space, and now with a button, I have the patch, and it's
Mhm.
like, but to me, when I hear about, you know, because I bought all their pedals too, so the MXR pedals
Yeah. Yeah.
and all those things. So to me, learning about, okay, they ran it through an echo pod, so they ran it through a space echo. They did that, and then I tried. I'm like, man, this is magic. It has a sound that is, just grittier or more character specific and less generic. And I love all that stuff. So I've researched it, dig into it. And my point, my long-winded point, was just that that's my job.
Mm.
I'm the producer
Yeah.
engineer and a keyboard player. So like that combo is like, all right, I'm the geek who's fully into it. And search and I collect and I do all that work so that I can present something that to the, you know, layman or just someone who's just a listener and doesn't know about the gear goes, wow, this is half, authentic Genesis sounding and half something new.
Yeah.
And I think that recipe has worked really well. Like I've gotten really good response, about as good, but actually no, I would say way better than I expected. And I have no ego about it. I'm in fact, if anything, it's like this is a celebration
Yeah.
of someone else's work, but through our eyes, through kind of like, well, we probably love the album more than Tony does. But they go to the limb, and they have their own personal feelings about it and all that. But to us, it's like every melody on this thing is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Beat that melody. That was good. We can, do things like that are just like, with love and with an understanding of or sensibility, let's say, because it's subjective, of where to extend something, where to change something, and where it would be sacrilege. Like, and you need to like preserve and respect the song.
And we talked about some of the other projects you work with. I love the two Arc of Life records, with Billy Sherwood and John Davidson and Kelly from Foreigner, or from yes, wrong band there. um,
And
Jay, yes, I'm thinking Hurricane. Back in the day, get my two Hurricane guys mixed up. With Jay Shellen. Any plans for another record from that band?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably done.
Yeah.
That one, interestingly, was born out of Billy and John having material that wasn't quite right for Yes per se, and now they're pretty busy, and Yes is very prolific. So they're kind of and then the other thing is I was brought on as an just because we're friends, so like we need a keyboard player, and so I didn't do much. I added some keyboards. I didn't write anything. I didn't sing. And playing in my band on Cruise to the Edge and a few other things, and he's like, I didn't know you could sing like that. Like you should be. And I'm like, yeah, but so anyway, long story short, I have another project that's be with Billy, Fernando Perdomo, and some other people, and it's kind of like a similar to Arc of Life, a bit more retro, a bit more 70s influenced by prog, yes, and King Crimson, and other influences, maybe a little bit of Genesis. It's a bit more I want to say it's a bit more proggy, or a bit more 70s prog, than the 80s than I normally do, and I normally kind of do. So it's just a little more indulgence in the vintage instruments and stuff on my part, and I'm producing it. So it's kind of like on these things, Billy's a producer, I'm a producer. One thing I love about Billy and Fernando is we share a kind of like philosophy of, okay, who's the captain of this ship? You. Okay, what do you need?
Take it.
And the other way around, so if Billy is working for you, he's amazing. He'll do anything you want. And Fernando too, like anything you want. fastest in the world. Two of them are like workaholics. So, but other times they're like, "Oh, I'm producing. All right, so I'll let you know if I need you."
Yeah.
But actually, Billy, I played on like one of his prog collective things, or no, it was the Supertramp one with
Yeah.
Jolene, and it was great. And I'm like, dude, anytime. And he's like, well, I've got Rick Wakeman. All these people. All right, well, let me know. But
Yeah. Uh, well, we've been spending some time here with Dave Kerzner. The record is called It, a celebration of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. It's fantastic. As somebody who's been a fan of that record for longer than I care to remember, I love this version. It's a great listen. It's a fun listen. And Dave, thanks so much for taking the time to talk about it.
awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks.